The first story is The Bell in the Woods. How can a sound from a simple item be the source of such recent and existential dread? I still ask myself that question as I lay awake at night. I have given up trying to get back to sleep. The sound, the images, they will not stop. Every moment of every night since it happened, I hear that chiming sound. It rings in tune with my own heartbeat, to the point where I feel like perhaps it has replaced it entirely. That chime so soft and pleasant, yet the things that it revealed, the things that the simple chime ushered into reality, are things I will never be able to forget, no matter how desperately I try. It all started when I found that odd bell. It was 3 weeks ago. I was walking along one of my favorite trails in a state park that I frequented. It was a refreshing and familiar way to enjoy a weekend afternoon. As I walked, I saw something strange near the trail end. It was what looked like a broken sign. At first, I thought it might be the trail sign itself, but it was still standing right where it always was. This one looked different. I stepped closer to see what looked like the burnt remains of a sign, almost like one you would see at a campground. All I could see that was still legible on the sign were the words, "Greenleaf." The odd sign piqued my interest, and when I looked closer, I saw faded footprints near the burned item. I decided to follow them, unable to resist the new mystery I had discovered. I walked for a while, in the direction of the faded footsteps. I almost turned back when I thought I had lost the trail, but dumb luck allowed me to rediscover it, and I pressed on. I reached a small clearing, and as I stepped into it, I felt an odd stillness in the air. The sounds of the animals in the forest and the general ambiance of the whole area seemed to depart. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart beating and the sound of my nervous breath. I pushed on and walked towards a strange shape I saw on the ground near where the trail had terminated. My excitement increased when I saw what looked like a chest, half buried in the ground. For a moment, I thought I had found legitimate treasure. I knelt down and reached for the side of the chest. I pulled it free from the loose earth still covering it. After gingerly opening the lid, I looked inside. There were no gold bars, no precious jewels. Only one item was in the ornate chest, a small silver bell. It looked finely crafted, yet not ostentatious. I fixated on the silvery sheen and wondered if it might be valuable. I half imagined the idea of buried pirate treasure, but I had no idea who would have buried a single bell in this chest, out in the middle of the woods. I decided to take the small bell, since I could not find any trace of whoever had exhumed the chest and left it there. As I left the clearing and went back to the main trail, the ambiance of the forest had resumed. I thought its absence had been strange, but shrugged it off and pressed on. I considered asking a park ranger about the weird chest in the forest if I ran into one. I hated to admit that I did not wish to, since I wanted to keep my unique prize to myself. The bell was very nice, and its smooth and polished surface was almost mesmerizing. I walked a bit farther, and then I felt a compulsion I had not felt before when I picked it up. I had inspected the fine craftsmanship, but I had not considered just how it might sound until that moment. Upon considering that question, I became fixated on it. It was all I could think about. After a few more steps, I was unable to move on without knowing the answer to the most important question in the world. What does the bell sound like? I held the slim handle between my thumb and index finger and delicately, almost reverently, shook the bell from side to side. The moment the sound rang out, it became the only sound in the forest. The soft chime felt like it somehow echoed for miles around. I felt an immediate sense of displacement and vertigo. I felt like I might be sick and thought I would collapse. Instead of falling down, somehow, I fell up. I whirled through the sky as if launched from a catapult. I remember trying to scream, but my voice was gone. I thought I would fall to the ground when I was plummeting through air high up above the trees in the forest. I discovered that I was not falling and had somehow stabilized in a gentle float high above the canopy of the trees. Somehow, I was flying. I looked around and saw the forest stretching on for miles. I had no idea how I was able to remain up in the sky. All I had done was ring the bell, and then suddenly I was up there. I looked around and saw a vibrant aura of colors emanating off of the forest, and the sky seemed to glow as well. I looked at my hands, and they seemed translucent and glowing, with a similar array of impossible shades. After floating in disbelief for a few minutes, I found I was able to move in an almost swimming-like motion. I tried to float back down to the surface and check the trail. Part of me was afraid I had a heart attack or something, and I had died. I thought for a moment that the reason I was floating and transparent was because I was a ghost now. When I descended back to the trail, my heart sank and my previous suspicion was all but confirmed. I saw myself laying on the ground. I still had the odd bell in my hand, but I was laying on my back in a strange pose. I glided towards my prone form to get a better look. I noticed I had an odd grey-like shade to my body, and the bell seemed to gleam a strange hue that looked otherworldly. I feared the worst and approached my body. To my relief, I saw that it appeared to be breathing still. Whatever was happening, I was still alive. At least my body was. It seemed to be some sort of out-of-body experience. The sense of free-floating displacement was almost alike to descriptions of how mentalists believe they can astral project their wills outside of their physical bodies and into the beyond. The strange experience felt almost exhilarating after I was no longer afraid that I had died. The excitement, however, was short-lived when I saw what happened next. I started to hear soft whispering near the edge of my perception. My vision started to double, and the skies seemed to darken. There was a tangible shift in the visible aura, energy around me, and I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me. I could not describe it, but something bad felt like it was happening. I felt I had to hide, but I also felt exposed since my body was just laying out in the open. I tried to wake myself up. I tried to float back into my body, but nothing worked. There were disturbing sounds emanating from the gathering shadows near the trees all around my fallen form. I thought if I could hide it might work. Yet, to my horror, I heard the soft chime of that bell emanating from my very being. The sound seemed to ring out from everywhere and nowhere, despite the physical bell laying unmoving in my rigid grasp down below. I started to get desperate. I tried in vain to slap myself awake and force myself up, but nothing I could do seemed to affect the waking world. Then I tensed up as I felt a new presence. I felt the staring eyes of some unseen force. I imagined hundreds of shadowy onlookers. Yet when I looked around, I could see nothing. Yet I knew somehow that I was not alone. Something else was there with me. I felt panic welling in my chest and felt like I would hyperventilate. Despite this ethereal form, I inhabited, not truly drawing breath at all. Suddenly I thought I could see hundreds of red dots emerging from the shadows in my peripheral vision. To make matters worse, The dim light in the forest seemed to fade even further, and when the light died out, the imperceptible beings at the edge of the shadows inched closer to myself, my body and the bell. I caught a direct glimpse of the horrible eyes of one of the entropic stalkers, and I was paralyzed with fear. It had no true form, just a moving conglomerate of living shadows, charged with that unsettling aura of oppressive darkness that was encroaching upon me even then. The red orbs it had where its eyes should be came more into focus as it inched closer. It looked straight at me for a moment, and then it started to shift and change before my eyes. The amorphous, liquid shadow grew arms, then legs, then a true head. Its colors shifted and changed and took on a dull gray, like my fallen body had. When the figure turned back to regard me again after its transformation, I could not believe what I saw. It was me, or at least a copy of me, that looked exactly like my prone form that still lay on the forest floor. It looked down at my body and then back to me. It twitched in a spasmodic and jerky fashion for a few moments. Then it focused directly on me and gave me a truly unnerving and knowing grin. It knelt down over my prone form and slowly extended a hand towards my body. I knew I was out of time. I focused as hard as I could on waking myself up. I willed myself to rise and felt my spirit launched back towards the shadowy doppelganger and my body. It had worked that time, and I lurched up with a scream on the forest floor. I was still clutching the bell, and my other arm raised up defensively against the lurking horrors in the dark. I shuddered when I thought of the shadowy hands of that entity who looked like me. I don't know what might have happened if it had gotten to my body first. There was nothing there now, but as I stood back up, I saw I had another problem. Somehow it was the dead of night now. It felt like it was only a short while in that strange state of ethereal motion, yet it must have been several hours in the waking world. I only had the flashlight on my phone to try and find my way, and I resolved to get out of there as soon as possible. I ran into the second problem at that point. Wherever I was not the state park anymore. I was on a trail, but not the one I was on before. It was not just the dark playing tricks on me. This was a different trail. I tried not to panic at my situation, but it was hard not to. I was lost and alone after an out-of-body experience in an unrecognizable place at night. I was not confident I could navigate out of wherever it was I was stuck. I decided to try and find shelter for the night. I found a small outcropping near what looked like the side of a mountain I did not recognize. I had a half tarp in my backpack I normally used for a mat for impromptu picnics. I used it and some sticks to form a micro shelter, and I hunkered down and tried to stay warm in the cold forest. Sleep did not come at all, however. After laying still for what felt like an hour, I heard something that terrified me. Or rather, it was what I did not hear again. The sounds of the forest, even the cold wind blowing through the trees, was silent once again. I looked down at the bell, near where I was sheltering. It seemed to be vibrating and moving almost on its own. Then I heard the whispering voices again, and to my horror, I saw what looked like the hazy images of eyes looking at me in the quiet blackness of the night. I tried to rise to my feet and scream, but I felt paralyzed by the nightmare image of the formless, shadowy eyes moving towards me again. The whispering voices increased in volume, and the sounds were becoming more perceptible. Then I realized in horror that I knew what they were saying. They were calling for me. They were calling my name. I forced myself to rise and break out of the nightmare scene, in a blind panic. I started to run before tripping over the small bell. I toppled through the dark and smashed face first into a large tree. As I tried to rise and groaned in pain, I heard the faint sound of the bell still chiming after my foot had inadvertently struck it. The next moment, my spirit was flung outside my body again, not as high up as before, as I seemed to have slightly more control over my spectral wandering. I saw that even at night things seemed brighter here. Colors contrasted starkly with certain elements in the environment. The thing I saw for sure when looking back towards where I had fallen were the wisps of reddish smoke that no doubt represented my shadow stalkers. My heart sank as I realized they were down there yet again with my empty vessel. I swam back down as fast as I could. Some of the red wisps lingered close to my fallen body. I got closer still and saw the nightmarish form of the red featureless entities close in on my body in the waking world. 3 of them loomed over my shell and looked back to see me arrive. They smiled in unison and reached down towards me. I tried to scream and willed myself awake again. Once more I succeeded, and I lurched up, finally vocalizing the frozen scream my ethereal form was unable to utter. It was daylight again. I looked around and saw that I was on the trail I was originally when I had found the burnt sign. The same trail that led me, in pursuit of those mysterious footsteps, to this odd little bell. I looked down and saw I was still holding it in my hand. I felt a chill creep up my spine as I swore. I heard the whispers again. I ran back to the burnt sign and down the trail that the now faded footsteps had led me down. I found the chest laying in the clearing, and I returned the bell to the chest and closed the lid. I did not have a shovel, but I tried to scoop handfuls of dirt over the chest. After what I had seen, I felt compelled to ensure no one discovered the thing ever again. When the deed was done, I started back to my car. As I trudged on, I considered the strange bell, the out-of-body experience and the awful night, hiding from the hungry shadows that whispered my name. That horrible face that mimicked mine, and whatever intent it had for my corporeal form. I shuddered and resolved never to return to the park again. I still do not know what any of it really was. I do not know what I really saw 3 weeks ago, but I wish I had not seen it. I wish I had not found it, because whatever I caught a glimpse of in the forest with that otherworldly bell, it is not done with me. I thought I could put the matter behind me, but I realized in subsequent days it would not be that easy. Recently I have begun to hear things, and I fear that just ridding myself of the bell was not enough. Every night since then I hear a faint chiming at the edge of my mind. I hear that sound, the chiming of the bell, slowly growing louder each night. Even though I have not touched the thing since I discarded it back to the earth, the chiming is still with me. The true horror dawns on me when the whispers begin again. I don't know what to do now, but I am afraid. I am afraid that I was not the only one to come back from those woods. The stillness in the air is palpable, and the soft chime makes me feel that familiar sense of displacement. I need to focus. They will be here soon, and I don't know where the sound will carry me next. The second story is the mall meetup. My arms shivered with goosebumps when Emma and Charlie got there. I held my arms tight to my sides. I didn't know it got this cold in the summer, I said, as they joined me under the glow of the Walmart sign overhead. Sorry it took so long. Emma's dad would not go to sleep, Janie said. Emma huffed. If you would have hopped the fence with me, we would have made it sooner. They were always like that. It made me wonder why Emma invited Janie over to spend the night, and not me. Either way, it's freezing, and I want to get to the mall as soon as possible, I said with a slight shiver in my voice. We laughed and told each other what horrible things were going to happen to us in the infamous mall for 15 minutes as we walked the sporadically lighted streets between the Walmart and the abandoned mall. They were tearing the thing down next week. This was our chance to finally explore it. As we got closer, we joked less, each of us trying to convince the others of our confidence. We made the last turn, and the mall peered from behind the trees like it was waiting for us. Fuck. I let slip. It looks worse than I thought. The cold was starting to hurt. Don't back out so early, Liz, Janie said. This isn't going to be like Halloween. Wasn't that you who backed out? Emma asked with a laugh. Janie rolled her eyes as we made our way through the empty parking lot. The mall felt hollow as we approached. As if we were not careful, it would pull us down like a whirlpool. We were silent by the time we got to the broken glass door of the Macy's. Everyone knew how to get into the mall. It was a common hangout spot for the rougher kids. Smoking, drinking, everything that I was not into. We stood around the opening. I could hear the wind pulling us in. We only have 5 hours until sunrise. Let's get going, I said, projecting a fearless attitude I did not have. After you, Janie said. I crouched through the open pane, and I am in. It reeked of piss and weed. The lights from the parking lot were blocked out to near total darkness by plywood. The town tried to keep people out. They did not try hard enough. It took a moment before my eyes fully adjusted to the darkness. By the time I could make out empty racks, empty beer cans, and layers of grime, Emma and Janie were standing inside with me. Being in here made it feel less ominous, less terrifying. It almost took the fun out of it. A piercing wail rang out through the mall, sharp and fantastic like a dying animal. It echoed. It was distant. Emma grabbed my hand and stepped back towards the door. Janie looked at us, trying to judge our reaction before showing hers. I squeezed Emma's hand, comforting her as much as myself. Do you think that was an animal? Janie asked, as if it was not the slightest bit unsettling. I don't think we should stay. We already did more than we did last time. Let's go and call it a win, Emma said, pulling my arm enough to cause me to step backwards. I think it was probably a raccoon or something, I said, for Emma as much as myself. We won't have the chance to do this again. I think we should at least get inside the concourse first. I regretted saying it as soon as my lips stopped moving. This was wrong, and we all knew it. We were playing off each other, though. It was inevitable. We went deeper into the store. Mannequins watched us walk in a tight line toward the concourse. Their featureless faces felt alive in the shadows. My breath quickened. The darkness ever more imposing. By the time we got to the concourse, we knew we were too far to turn back. The silver moonlight illuminated the endless main hall. Empty storefronts all had security cages pulled down. It was like a zoo or a prison. Trash filled the corners and stains covered the walls. Whatever that place was like in its day was completely absent then. We were all taking the desolation in silence. It felt like the shadows began to shift. Breathless, constant wailing pierced the silence. It reverberated around us. It was coming from every direction. Emma screamed. I grasped her hand. Janie started back towards the Macy's. We followed, running as fast as we could. The wailing shifted. gurgling and strained as it grew louder. It wormed into my mind, pulling me. It was getting closer, and it was not a raccoon. We sprinted back through the store. The mannequins were closer. Their eyeless faces turned towards us. My legs were burning, my breathing strained, but the cries pushed me forward. It was everywhere inside my head. Dust fell through the beam of light coming from the hole in the door. We were so close. The wailing vibrated through my teeth, burrowed into my skull. Emma's hand was tight in mine. I held on like it was my lifeline. Her hand tore from mine so hard I almost fell. "Emma!" I gasped. Janie's figure slipped through the hole as I turned. Emma was gone, and it was there. Teeth, slick with blood and saliva, glistened in the dark. Red eyes burned into mine. Impossible shapes writhed in the darkness, shifting like smoke. I wanted to help her. Everything in me wanted to pull her back from whatever it was. But my body didn't listen. It only cared about my survival. I only cared about my survival. I ran, scurrying out of the hole like a rat. The wailing was dripping and full. I can't think about it. I just ran. The freezing air burned my lungs. The mall loomed behind us, alive in the darkness, its shadows reaching out hungry for more. It took Emma, and it wants more. The third story is The Girl at My Window. I'm from the Philippines, 28F. This happened years ago while I was in grade school, and it still spooks me when I think about it. I used to live in Dasmariñas village, Makati, and studied in Colegio de San Agustin, and I used to walk to school every morning. The house we were renting was pretty old and kinda creepy. It had a huge mahogany tree and a balit tree in the backyard. Those who have studied in CSA or lived in that village know how big the trees are there. Our neighbors who have lived in the area for years would tell us stories about how enchanted and scary the place is, and that we should be careful with disrespecting the big tree we had in our backyard. But I remembered there were times I would wake up with caked up mud on my blankets and thought it was me getting into bed with dirty feet. But I always took a shower before bedtime, so I don't have to in the morning. I didn't think much about it. TBH, I didn't really understood any of it. I was busy surviving grade school. I had a best friend who I met in first grade, and we were close all through out grade school. Let's call her M. She was just like me. We loved manga and anime and would draw stuff for each other. She was obsessed with the idea of wolves and vampires and the moon, and how they changed during the night. She would tell me that she was a werewolf, and she would go hunting at night and wake up thinking it was all just a dream. You know, typical things kids would make up. I thought it was kinda cool, and how good she was with illustrating that kind of imagination on paper. The other kids would think she was weird, 'cause she'd hiss and growl at them if they started messing with her, while I, on the other hand, would defend her. I remember one time during lunch we were drawing, and she left to buy something. So I thought I'd browse through her sketchbook. It was really cool until I landed on one page of a girl in bed, sleeping, and a werewolf climbing into her bedroom through the window. At first it kinda bothered me that something looked familiar in that picture, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Until I flipped the page and my eyes widened. Not because of the werewolf standing over the sleeping girl in bed, but because how I realized that it was Room. And I swear I've never invited her to my place before. My mom is very strict, and I wasn't allowed to have any friends over or hang out with friends outside of school. She got everything right from the dodgy bed frame to the old stained white lamp on my bedside table, the old K-Zone magazines stacked up underneath my bed. Then it hit me. When my eyes was looking at the bed sheets and the mud from the werewolf's feet soiling the bed. I didn't realize how fast my heart was pumping until she turned up behind me and asked me, "Do you like it?" I turned around to face her, and she had this dead look in her eyes and a grin that gave me chills. I played it cool and asked who the girl was. And she said, "It's you, dummy. Don't you recognize your room?" And I didn't say a word and just looked at her. Then she continued to ask me, "You remember when I would tell her I would transform into a werewolf at night? Sometimes I would go to your house just so that I can see a..." I was too stunned to speak. Like, WTF, this isn't real. I didn't talk to her after that and brushed it off until I moved to another school the next year and moved out of that house. That's when I would read on Filipino folklore about aswangs, and I told my mom about it, and she got mad at me because it freaked her out, and that I should have told her back then about M. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed this story, and it sent shivers down your spine, please give this video a like. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring more stories like this to you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next chilling tale. Your subscription inspires me to create better and scarier content just for you. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and don't forget to watch your back. See you soon.